She's passionate about telling stories of amazing women who are rocking the world and empowering women to live, love, and thrive. Here's your host, Catherine Gray.
Hi, welcome to Live, Love, Thrive Women's Empowerment Hour, brought to you by, of course, 360karma.com. We hope you're joining the Women's Empowerment conversation on our Facebook, as well as following us on Twitter and Instagram at My360Karma. I hope you're having a great day. It's going to be even more amazing once you listen and meet our guest. We have an incredible guest today. Her book just dropped on Amazon. It is called American Psychic. And if I'm a little psychic myself, I think it's going to be a bestseller. I want you to meet the author. She's a Hollywood actress turned psychic medium and now author. Please meet Marla Freeze. Hi, Marla. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey, huh?
It certainly has been.
Oh, my gosh. You know, I am so fortunate. I did order your book, and I am so fortunate that I got to read it before we actually had this interview.
Good.
And I highly recommend it to my listeners. Your story is extraordinary. And I say that because there's so many listeners, I'm sure, that will identify with what has happened to you, and that is, and I just want to touch on this to explain, you know, what an incredible gift you have with this psychic ability and the journey to discovering this. Yeah. And that is that you had a very dark childhood. And a lot of people do. A lot of people do have abuse in their childhood and whatnot, and mental illness in their family that they have to cope with in a parent. And as a child, you know, you don't understand. There is no rhyme or reason for what a parent does when they are mentally ill. Like, you can't rationalize it.
No, you can't.
Yeah. I once had a therapist tell me, Catherine, you will drive yourself crazy trying to rationalize irrational people, right?
Well, it is. Yeah. It's very much like that.
Yeah.
You don't know that it's not normal, actually.
Right. As a child, that's all you know, right?
Well, until you go to other people's houses.
Right.
And then you see something different.
Right.
And then you go home and you're navigating, you're constantly navigating, which is what I think and how some of my psychic abilities were developed because of that heightened sensitivity.
Yeah. And I mentioned that to a friend of mine this morning who had a traumatic childhood as well, and said they absolutely identified with what you're saying about separating your body from your mind so that you can deal with what's happening. And so I imagine that there's a lot of people here listening, understanding exactly what you're saying.
Yes,
you know.
Well, there's a dissociative quality. They talk about this in therapy, where you're actually, part of your consciousness is leaving your body when something is being done to your body that you don't like.
Right.
When that could be just verbal abuse, and it happens often.
Right.
So it really is learning and trying to get yourself back together, which is basically the other half of the book, which is not just the trauma, it is the drama of finding your way through it, and then it's the inspiration, it's the transformation.
Right. So you had a very challenging situation. Your dad, who had been wounded in the war, came back pretty much as an alcoholic, right? I mean,
yes, he came back in a body cast. He had been blown up in a mine, a Jeep mine explosion, and I mean it's very traumatic for him to come back and be in a body cast for an entire year. Yeah. And of course, it blew my mother's dream because she wanted to be an officer's wife.
Right. And you know, maybe there was a mental illness on her side anyway, but I'm sure that this whole situation exacerbated it.
Yes.
So here you are with someone who's being abusive and someone who's alcoholic, and wow, what a double whammy, huh? But I love, in the course of your book, how you take those lemons and you've turned it into lemonade.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, that's what we do.
That's what you're inspiring other people to do.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate that, because that is the trajectory of the book. It is the Shero's journey, and you are empowering women, and this is just another way of empowering a woman to take on the difficulties of a childhood, move it through, and there were so many things that helped me. I mean, acting, I believe, saved my life.
Well, I mean, how does a girl who's a pig farmer's daughter in Pennsylvania end up being a very successful Hollywood actress? I mean, you've been on such popular shows, Seinfeld and Married with Children and Sybil and all of my favorites, actually. Those are all my favorites, and Everybody Loves Raymond.
And some of them, some that are coming back, like Roseanne and Murphy Brown.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I'm glad you asked that, because I saw that my mother enjoyed one thing in life, and it was television. And she watched it every day. She watched her stories. And I thought, well, if I can get into that box across the room, if I can get in there, maybe she will appreciate me, love me, and not hurt me. So I thought, I'm going to become an actress. I'm going to get in that box.
Wow, that's fascinating that you thought that. I mean, what a reason, what an interesting driving force for that. And I mean, coming from outside of Hollywood and going in there and becoming a successful actress, is, as anybody here in Hollywood knows who's an actor, that is not an easy feat. But what a focus and determination that you had.
Well, I also, you know, I have to credit the gift of spirit, that consciousness that has been leading all of us.
Right.
You know, this was not just my trajectory. On some level, I believe that this is the way it was supposed to happen.
Right.
As, of course, you read in the book.
Right. Right. And it is about listening to people's insides and following that, which I guess is what you're calling like spirit guide. You know, people call it different things, but the bottom line is, I always say your insides never steer you wrong, whatever label you want to put on that.
Your gut instincts,
your gut instincts,
your awareness, your intuition, all of that.
Exactly.
Well, I got into some trouble, so it's not like my choices were all perfect, right?
Right. Yeah.
But you have to read the book for that.
Yeah, exactly. What a book it is. What a ride it is. Yeah, we could never touch on everything, which would be senseless anyway, because you want people to read the book, of course. But I mean, it's so much more interesting to read the book than just even to talk about it. I mean, you know, to hear the story and in a written format. And you're a great writer, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, you mentioned something that's important, and it's going on a ride. And that's what we do. When we pick up a book, especially for the summer, you want to go on a ride. And it takes you all over the place.
It does.
And it's all true.
Yeah, it's some ride.
It's all true.
And so throughout your life, you kept getting these little indications that you were psychic in some way, or intuition, but couldn't really put your finger on it. And I think you did what most people do, and that is really question it. And even when you attended your first opportunity to meet James van Praagh, who the famous psychic that you've worked with and were friends with even before he was famous.
Yes.
Oddly enough, you know, not oddly enough, but, you know, as spirit would have it, put him in your life.
Absolutely.
And, you know, even when you first went to him, you were skeptical and...
I didn't believe in talking to the dead.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Right.
Actually,
And I think we'll have a lot of listeners that are saying the same thing.
Well, and listen, you know, you got to be careful what you make fun of, because it comes back around.
Yeah.
And I watched him on television. I thought, oh, that's just a crock. What is that? And while I was watching him, a girlfriend called and said, you know, I can't get together with you this weekend. I'm going to see James van Praagh. And I said, I can't believe it. I'm watching him right now on TV. She said, but you have an opportunity to go see him too. And so I took that attitude of mine, you know, that very skeptical attitude, and I went in.
Yeah.
And I came out so moved that I got down on my hands and knees. Excuse me, I'm thinking. And I prayed. I prayed for guidance about this.
Right.
You know, there was something going on in my life that was pretty tragic at that time, and I asked for help. And I said, I want to know about this talking to the dead business.
Right.
So I had a dream that lasted for 4 hours about 2 words, the center. And for 4 hours, that could really make someone go mad. But it really got into my consciousness. And my girlfriend called and asked me how I enjoyed James, and I told her about that dream. Well, she happened to be best friends with his personal assistant, and they called me, and I was in his office the next day.
Because of that dream.
And he was having the same dream too.
Yeah, that's mind-blowing, isn't it?
Yes, and I didn't leave.
And that's how you all became friends.
Well,
basically, I mean, he asked you then to go to Brazil and...
Yes.
Yeah.
And I basically volunteered for him. I was making enough money as an actress at the time that I could.
Oh, wow.
So it was amazing. And I got him before he became very psychic, before he became really famous.
Yeah.
It was before his
You know what's
first
so
book came
funny
out.
is he has a show here at UBN where we're doing our show here.
I love that.
Yeah, so it comes back around, doesn't it? It's the world is a small place.
And this is also where I shot Married with Children.
Oh my gosh, that's right.
On
You
the
said
same
that
lot,
on the same lot, and here you are today. Right when your book has dropped, which is, I mean, who knew back when you were doing Married with Children as an actress that you would be writing a book about being an American psychic? You never would have dreamed that in a million years.
Not in a million years. So, and I'm thrilled to be here.
So, this has taken you on such a vast journey of different turns, and so after working with James. Your psychic abilities have been used in so many ways, seen on so many different television shows. I know Sci-Fi Network and Bravo and various ones, including Gaia, which we're going to talk about later, which is like the spiritual Netflix. Listeners are going to have an opportunity to buy your book and then get 2 weeks free of their streaming.
gift.
Yeah.
An amazing gift.
So we're going to talk about that. And that's at American-Psychic.com, where people can buy your book and get the free Gaia. So what I want to talk about is all the different usages of your psychic abilities. So it was interesting because the next thing I knew in the book, you're using it to solve crimes. And I guess not everybody uses their ability for that, but somehow you got thrust into that situation really without your meaning to, I think.
Right.
But when you have that capability and that opportunity to help people, you know, I think that's one of the biggest things, unsolved crimes in this country is I remember being with a friend of mine, a girlfriend at the time, who her mother had been killed, and we didn't know who did it. And I think to this day we still don't know who did it. And so I can imagine what a gift it is that you are able to help people figure out the perpetrator or the situation. And you even explain that sometimes the person that was killed comes to you, but sometimes it's the perpetrator that comes to you, which is I found very fascinating. I know a lot of people probably are, baffled with this whole conversation, but if they read the book, it is fascinating. There could be no coincidences in the things that have happened to you and the experiences that you've had. And so if you are a doubter, definitely read the book. Yeah.
Well, this started a long time ago. In the beginning of my youth, there were a couple of murders that happened in my hometown, which never, ever happened. And that sort of got me thinking in different ways. So it wasn't as though I was repelled by murder. I was really curious about it. And I think that that's how we develop our intuition. We have to be extremely curious. I think that Einstein said, how he approached any aspect or any equation is to be wildly curious about something.
I think that's why I love doing my show. I'm wildly curious about people's stories, but I could never be in your shoes and be wildly curious about a murder. I just find it so,
Well, it's interesting. I understand that, and a lot of people have that reaction.
Yeah, but it's great. I mean, it's like some people want to work in a hospital and some don't. You know what I mean? Everybody's got to have something different that they feel passionate about, and you're wanting to use your gift for the greater good to help people solve crimes, and that's cool.
Yes. Well, I think that it's also it's not about me solving anything, and it's about me giving assistance to those that need help, and that's detectives, homicide detectives. I mean, when they bring me in, it's because they're at their last wits. They're at a place where they have no problem. I mean, what do they have to lose bringing me in on something? But
so usually they're blown away, right? Like in the book when you talk about, they've had you come in and they, have the skepticism, but then you start telling them details that nobody else would know. They're kind of, their eyes light up and they're like, wow, this is for real.
Well, and some of them are like that. I can't talk about any of the cases that I've been working on except the ones that are in the book, of course. But the dynamic of being able to assist law enforcement, you're doing something for them to find the perpetrator, but also, you're doing something for the family too. And if I'm able to tap into the deceased loved one, which I've done on camera on different television programs, that's really wonderful for the family.
Right.
It's also great for the person on the other side. The person on the other side doesn't have an issue necessarily with being dead. they have an issue with how their family feels about the murder.
That makes such perfect sense. Like when this happened to my friend and her mother was killed, she had a nervous breakdown, and I'm sure if she could have communicated with her mother, there would be some sort of solace in that. And also, if it was possible to solve, who did it, there would have been some peace in that. I think when people don't know what happened, that's really just so difficult for them that it's really painful.
Well, I just had a cop call me the other day, and this is a woman who had heard about me, and it was really actually I was helping her with her own psychic abilities because she said, I'm seeing this a certain way. So I said, let's just talk about it briefly because I had made some notes about it.
Right.
So our brains sort of entwined to the actual location of some of the things that happened. So it's up to her and her detectives to follow through on this. But it was also great for her to have it reflected back to her that I was actually seeing some of the same things.
Wow. And when you say seeing some of the same things, I think that's the part that is hard to wrap my head around, and I think probably a lot of viewers too, is yeah, that's great that you're helping someone, but you literally have a movie camera on the whole scene as it unfolds sometimes.
Well, let me tell you
and
how
you're in that person's position while they're being, brutally hurt or killed or whatever. And I can't imagine feeling that you're inside that person's story. I just find it so frightening. I don't know how you do that.
Well,
I wouldn't want to do that, but
Yeah,
God bless you
that.
that you do and that you want to help people like that.
Well, there's a benevolence to this. So there's
Yeah.
a detachment in it.
I see.
And sometimes I do see it from the victim's point of view. Sometimes it is just like a camera, just like you were saying it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm experiencing as the victim, and sometimes I do see it from the perpetrator's point of view.
Right.
And then I'm
Which
able
is
to...
creepy too, not for nothing.
Well,
Yeah. Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
it's kind of like this. I'm
Yeah.
going to give you an example,
Yeah.
and for the audience, I want to give you an example of how it actually happens.
Right.
Do you remember what you did this morning for breakfast?
Yes.
Okay. So you go into the kitchen. What?
Yeah.
Give me some things. What happened?
Went into Hugo's, ordered a couple of eggs, and
Right.
had breakfast.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I see things just like that, but they're not my memory.
Yeah.
They're either the perpetrator's memory
Oh, so someone
or the
else's
victim's
memory.
memory.
Wow.
Yes. And I'll see Hugo's, I'll see maybe a placemat.
Right.
Sometimes I'll see other people in the vicinity. So
Right.
it's the detail of being able to do that.
So you're kind of seeing it through their eyes.
Yes. Well, I was trained by the U.S. military psychic
I
spies.
read that. I mean, that's another whole aspect, being trained by the military that I didn't even know that people did this, but the military trains people to be able to spy through this type of espionage of using psychic abilities, right?
Yes. Well, there was a
I
covert...
mean, how many people out there know that? I don't know.
Well,
Yeah.
anybody that's interested in this kind of work
Yeah.
are going to be curious, and maybe somebody today is going to look up the U.S. military psychic spies. But there was a covert operation between the 60s and the 90s, men and women who had certain unique abilities that were put into this program. And
And you were in one of them.
no.
Oh, no.
No, I wasn't one of the military
okay.
people. Actually, when it disbanded, some of those people went and did, taught lay people like myself.
Oh, okay. So that's who you were taught
Yes,
by,
Lynn
yeah.
Buchanan is the one who trained me. And I followed the other teachers as well. But it's a fascinating protocol that was developed at SRI, Stanford Research. And it basically was Ingo Swann, who was a psychic himself, who developed this protocol.
Right.
And the military took it on, and it was fairly successful, and it continues to be successful, but it's all underground. So.
Right. So we can't talk about it.
We can't talk about that. No.
And then you also worked with the author of Many Lives, Many Masters.
Yes.
Who
gave
Brian
me
Weiss.
Brian Weiss,
Right.
who gave me a beautiful endorsement on the front cover of the book.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. And I think a lot of people are familiar with his work of past life regressions. There's so many moving parts to this psychic thing. Everything from personal to crime solving to military espionage to past life regression.
Yes.
And one other area we're going to talk about, which would be UFOs and space.
Sure.
Which you also touched on
Yes.
in your book. so many fascinating parts.
But it's amazing what our minds and our hearts can do, because it's not just the brain. I mean, all of the precognition, the empathic qualities, the intuition, it's all psychic functioning. So it's all a part of this that we're able to do with our hearts and our minds.
Right.
It's fascinating. And the way that our brains are wired. I mean, everybody has this gift. It's just how are they going to use it?
Right. What was your experience like with Brian Weiss? I mean, to actually get to meet him in person and work with him, did you do some regression, right?
Yes. Well, again, I was highly skeptical.
Yep.
Actually, I was working with James at the time, and he said, "Come on, we're going to take a boat down to Ensenada, Mexico." And I just couldn't believe that there was a guy that wanted to talk about past lives. I wasn't there to talk to Brian. I was there to watch somebody that was doing some detective work, and I thought that was going to be interesting.
Yeah.
So at dinner the night before, I asked Brian, what happens to these people? I mean, everybody thinks that they're related to Cleopatra or something.
Right.
And he said, no, everybody has a lot of skepticism.
Of course I am, but no.
I thought that it was Mary Queen of Scots, I think. But he understands the skepticism, so he regressed us all, and it was one of the most dramatic experiences of my life.
Wow.
It was special.
So what can you share with us?
Sure.
Like, what did you see?
It's in the book, but I'll tease it
like
a little bit.
A little teaser,
Well, I was on a precipice, standing, looking at the earth, and the earth moved forward closer to me. And I knew I was a woman. I looked down and saw my feet. I was in a white robe, and I was shown the United States. And all of a sudden, light started happening on the East Coast and the West Coast, and light back and forth, back and forth. And I thought, my gosh, do I have to go back there? And I was told I had to pole light. And I thought, what is that? And then I was sent to this room with these tall sort of, it was like a council on these benches, like a high court.
I remember this part.
Like a high court. And I signed my papers begrudgingly, and I was sent down here, I guess.
Wow.
But I was above the earth, looking at the earth, which I find very interesting.
Wow. Well, I think a good majority of people believe there is afterlife and life on other planets. I know you had an interesting UFO experience in Arizona.
Yes.
Sedona, right?
Yes.
And so you think Sedona is a very spiritual place, yes? I've heard has a vortex there?
There's, vortexes, vortices, I'm not exactly sure which one of those words it is, but yes, they're all over the place. And I was not, again, skepticism. I was so skeptical, wasn't interested in seeing UFOs. I was being dragged out there. I was with James Van Praagh in a van, and I was like making cracks, making jokes. You know, how are we going to connect with them? You know, tin cans and a string or something like that. But literally, I got out there, and what we saw was really extraordinary. And it changed my life. And actually, I ran into James about 2 years ago talking about this thing that happened 20 years ago. And I said, do you remember what happened after that? And he said, no, I don't. I said, well, we ended up at a bar. That was the last thing that I remember. We saw craft with our Russian goggles, night vision goggles, and what we saw was so dramatic and extraordinary. It was so bizarre that I actually scratched the lens to make sure that there wasn't a little craft sitting on there, because I could not believe what I was seeing.
Right. And I think that would be most people's reaction. So I knew this interview would fly by because your life is so fascinating and what you're doing is incredible. And if somebody wanted to, I know you do groups and individual readings for people that want to either touch base with the deceased, or there's, the crime solving, or, lots of different aspects of what you do. They would go to marlafreeze.com.
Yes, marlafreeze.com.
Right.
I will only
Which is MARLAFREES.com.
Okay. I will only work with law enforcement officials on a case.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, I don't mind working with the families in after they have found the body, or they at least know what the perpetrator situation is.
Right.
But any kind of law enforcement is pro bono, that I work only with detectives.
Okay.
But anybody that
why is that? Just so that people
Well,
understand?
first off, one of the problems is people want information from me that they want to take to law enforcement, and that's not appropriate.
Oh,
I need
gotcha.
to keep it as clean as possible, and
Right.
also family members are very emotional.
Yes,
So
I can
they have a
imagine.
lot of heightened awareness,
Right.
and we just want to make sure that things have been handled in order for us to contact their deceased loved ones, and
Right.
and so that they're not dealing with the actual case.
Right. You don't want to deal with like a traumatized person, I'm sure.
Well, everybody gets traumatized when there's a murder.
Yes.
But the dynamic of keeping it separate is really, really important.
Right.
But people come to me in asking help for any aspect of their lives.
Have both your parents passed?
Yes.
Okay. So, and you communicate with them?
Yes.
And has there been a healing in that?
Absolutely. That's the
yeah.
trajectory of the book.
Yeah, I think that people I think that's what they would find is some solace in that. I know in one of your sessions that somebody found peace with their mom, and
Well, that's what it's all
you know,
about, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, why else should we be able to communicate with the deceased loved ones unless it's to connect the love?
Yes.
And it's also often about forgiveness,
Right.
because most of our lives are about love, loss, and forgiveness.
Right.
And there's no other reason to do this work unless it's to help somebody.
Right. Well, I hope people go to American-Psychic.com.
Yes, now this is the Gaia gift.
Yes, and they can buy the book there, and when they do, they're going to get a couple of weeks free
Yes.
of Gaia. And if people don't know what Gaia is, it's like the spiritual Netflix.
Yes.
It has higher consciousness programming.
Yes, it's
How
all
fabulous
and
is
it's
that?
it's their own programming.
Yeah.
So it's
And
all
I've been wanting to try that out, so I'm very excited to get this subscription
I
and
know.
try it out and probably keep it. Yeah.
Anybody who buys on Amazon American Psychic can go to this site, American-Psychic.com, and get this free gift. I mean, it's amazing. 2 weeks of free Gaia,
Yeah.
8,000, at least 8,000 videos.
Wow.
And there's also an app. You can see it on your phone, your tablet,
Oh, I love
Apple
that.
TV, Roku.
Yeah, I look at everything on my
Amazon
phone.
Prime. So
Yeah.
it's an amazing gift.
Great. Well, you are extraordinary, and your journey is amazing. I enjoyed reading about it, and I know that the viewers will.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you so much for being on the show. Good
I'm so
luck with it.
excited.
I can't
Yeah,
wait for
me
it to
too.
hit the bestseller list.
Okay, here it
Yeah.
is. We love a little self-promotion here.
There we go. So pick up American Psychic. Thank you for being on the show, Marla
Thank you.
Fries. And we'll see you next week. Make it a great week. Visit us at 360karma.com. We really do believe that you create your fate, and we'd like to inspire you to do so. Make it a great week. Hugs and happiness.